For the stream to fire up all across the fruited plains of the internet. Before we go ahead and get started, let's make sure that YouTube is working before I just start rambling off into the intersphere. Don't want that to happen. Looks like it's booting up, and I think that we're alive and well. So that means we can go ahead and get started. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gruler. I am a criminal defense attorney here at the R&R Law Group located in Scottsdale, Arizona. And today, we're talking about Gretchen Whitmer, the Whitmer Kidnapping Plot. This has been a plot, allegedly, that has been in the making for quite some time. And the prosecution is also taking some time because there's a lot going on here. If you recall, this involved Governor Gretchen Whitmer out of Michigan. Allegations were back during the year of 2020, right in the middle of the election. Allegedly, a bunch of white supremacist, racist Trump supporters were going to go and kidnap Governor Whitmer, who, of course, at the time was somebody who was very outspoken, very adversarial, very opposed to Donald Trump. And so this, many people are saying, was kind of a hint of what was to come on 1/6 after the event took place there at the Capitol. And now that this prosecution has been going forward, now that the U.S. government has been trying to actually convict 5 people for this alleged plot, we're learning a lot more about what really went down. We're learning, in fact, that there were some very problematic FBI agents involved in this case. 3 gentlemen that we're going to talk about today: Jayson Chambers, Special Agent Richard Trask, who we've spoken about previously, as well as an FBI agent called Henrik Impola. 3 guys who were highly involved in this investigation, who the U.S. government decided not going to call them. Don't even need them. You know, the law enforcement people who investigated everything that you'd ordinarily call in a criminal trial, don't need them this time. So we're going to break that down. We're going to learn a lot more about these 3 heroic FBI agents. And then we're going to take a look at some of the motions that are being filed in this case. This case is scheduled for trial very soon. And so we're going to talk about all of that and more. We're going to get our bearings straight. Quick update, of course. Normally we're talking about Ghislaine Maxwell on this channel, but Ghislaine Maxwell, almost no news today. Ghislaine Maxwell jurors are still deliberating, and she is not going to basically see the courtroom again until it sounds like December 27th. So the jurors, they could have come back tomorrow to deliberate. They decided they didn't want to do that. They wanted to go and enjoy their holiday, and so they're off the clock until Monday after the holiday. So we're going to be spending some time talking about some other cases, nice little break. But of course, when Ghislaine Maxwell becomes something worthwhile, we'll be talking about that as usual. And so if you want to be a part of the show, the place to do that is over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. There is a form that looks just like this. You can ask your questions, throw those in there. We'll do our very best to get through those. We also have a clips channel, looks like this, Robert Gruler, ESQ clips, if you want to take a look. And yeah, we're also, I see some Ray Epps conversations going on there in the chat. Ray Epps is another one that I'm very interested in digging into. So we've got a lot to talk about from the FBI. Let's get into it. The Governor Whitmer plot. We've got a lot to talk about. We're going to start off by getting our bearings straight, remembering what actually happened in this case, and what better way to do it than by referring to the mind map. And so let's go ahead and do that. We're going to pull that up. The mind map is available in the description below, so you can follow along if you'd like. But it's been some time since we've talked about this case, and so let's go ahead and get our bearings straight. We know Governor Whitmer, governor of Michigan, this is what she looks like. She allegedly was the victim of a plot. Allegedly, the story goes that these 5 gentlemen, along with a number of other people, specifically in this case, we're talking about these 5 guys. Now, there were a lot of other people involved in this. So allegedly, there allegedly was, all these different militia groups, the 3 percenters, the Wolverines, blah, 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 that were all allegedly a part of this plot. But in this case, the case that we're talking about, we're only talking about these 5 gentlemen. We'll see down here that there are other co-conspirators. You can see people like Paul Bellar, Sean Fix, William Null, Pete Musico. We've got Joseph Morrison, Eric Molitor, Michael Null. All of these people were sort of in this circle, in this universe, but we're not talking about them. We're talking specifically about the 5 named defendants, co-defendants here: Adam Dean, Barry Croft, Brandon Castera. We talked a lot about him, Daniel Joseph Harris, and Kaleb Franks. And you can see, you can follow along. And as this mind map continues to evolve, we're going to continue to flesh this out. So we'll add notes, we'll add links, will follow along. Now, there's something to be said about this, okay? These 5 guys are working together, more or less. They are in alignment. You may recall that when they were originally charged for this alleged kidnapping plot, this other guy down here, Ty Garbin, was sort of a part of that crew. He wasn't down here in the pink mind map node. He was actually up in the purple mind map node because he was part of that crew, but he pled guilty, and now he's actually working with the government against those 5 other people. And so you'll see this happen all the time, that the government will try to break these co-defendants up because the co-defendants are stronger in numbers. If they all get up on the stand and they say, I didn't do it, and the next guy, I also didn't do it, and the next guy, I also didn't do it, and the next guy, I also didn't do it, it's really hard to prove a conspiracy if you have everybody who was involved in the conspiracy who takes the stand and say, there was no conspiracy. All of this was being orchestrated by somebody else. All 5 co-defendants can say, wasn't us, it was the FBI. And if they're all in unison, if they're all in alignment, that makes their story that much more powerful. So what the government wants to do is break them up, peel them off, and say, hey, we're going to give you a better deal as long as you go ahead and, help us with our case. We need you to testify against these other guys. And so allegedly, or apparently, some sort of strategy like that is what's happening here. You can see that Ty Garbin is no longer part of this case. He has pled guilty, case is closed, and the story goes that he is helping the government. Yeah, and so Jeremy Matrita over on Local says, if you're arrested as a group, silence for all is best. You remember how this works when you're a child. Nobody say anything. Everybody just shut up. We'll all be fine. Just don't say anything. Nobody knows how that got there. Weird. No idea. Do you know? No, don't know. How about you? No, no idea. Well, that's weird. Nobody knows how that happened. All right, I guess you can all go. I may have used that one once or twice. Okay, so now that we know what the defendants look like, we've got these 5 guys here, Barry, Adam, Brandon, Daniel, Joseph, and Kaleb. We know that the allegations were that they were part of this militia group and that them plus all of these other co-conspirators, that they were responsible for coming up with this conspiracy, and then they were going to kidnap and ultimately, essentially, eliminate the governor. Okay, so let's see what else is going on now in the court case. So you can see this is being filed out of the, where is this? Court docket is here. Let's pull this up. Court listener, the District Court for the Western District of Michigan is exactly where that is. And so let's take a look at the judge. We know a little bit more about him. This is Judge Robert J. Yonker. A little bit about his bio. So he is law clerk, Judge F. Fakins from Eastern District, private practice, Grand Rapids. He went to Calvin College, University of Michigan Law School, appointed by George Bush. And he's been in office for a while. So since about 2015, he's been around over there. And this is why I wanted to start covering this case a little bit, because this is coming up. Okay, the judge came out, and we've got some pretty near court dates coming up. We've got the final pretrial conference taking place in February, and then we have the actual trial date starting the first week of March. And so this is going to come by, this is going to come and go very quickly. We're going to be hashing all of this out. Motions and a bunch of stuff is due like right now. And so this is why we're seeing a lot of cool activity happening. We're seeing that both sides flesh out what they're going to be presenting. So you can see this comes from the court. This is the order setting dates. We saw that this week on the 17th, we had all sorts of new documents submitted. So we're going to spend some time going through some of those. We also see that there are some deadlines in January. There are going to be pretrial conferences. Yep, we've already passed all of those. And then trials scheduled on March 8th. So that's coming up. Now, let's take a quick look at the original complaint. This is sort of like the indictment. This would be analogous to an indictment. But this is from the FBI. So I think I actually have the cover sheet. I maybe didn't attach the cover sheet. But the cover sheet shows you that this document was signed off on by this guy, Richard J. Trask. So we're going to pay close attention to that name because it is going to come back up as the show progresses. Here's what it says. I, Richard Trask, FBI agent, been involved with the FBI since 2011. I am part of the Domestic Terrorism and Counterterrorism Organization. I have seen everything. I'm investigating a conspiracy to kidnap the governor of Michigan. Violation of 18 U.S. Code. During the course of our investigation, we met with a lot of these people, the confidential human sources and undercover employees. So we're going to be spending a lot of time on that because they're going to try to gloss over this. We have CHS1, CHS2, UCE1, and UCE2. And previously on this channel, we had talked about that. FBI Agent Richard Trask. Let's get our bearings straight. Who is Richard Trask? And so if we go down here, we can see that we have Richard Trask right down here. This is what he looks like. And we're going to learn a little bit more about him in a minute. I don't think I attached any of the pertinent documents to his node just yet, but we will get that filled out. But that's who we're talking about. So when we go back up, he's the guy who actually signed off on this. Richard Trask, FBI agent, that guy we just looked at. He signed off on this, says that we're going to be investigating these 5 co-defendants. There were a bunch of people that were at a group meeting in Ohio to discuss this. Who was there? Well, Croft, who's a defendant, Fox was there. 13 other people from several different states gathered there. And we recall, because we've gone through this a lot, confidential human source was there. And we start to ask ourselves about who is this confidential human source? Is this an actual civilian? Or is this somebody who is an actual FBI agent? Is this somebody who's working for the government? We're learning a little bit more about this militia group. The militia group had already been brought to the FBI's attention, and so they were investigating them. They were doing field training exercises out there. And then suddenly, there was a shift. The organization that was built of this militia that was out in Michigan, they focused their attention on Governor Whitmer. Remember, she was getting into it with Donald Trump. They were fighting all over lockdowns. They were fighting over COVID. And so they started to plot, to plan, and to kidnap, a plan to kidnap the governor. July 18th, a lot of this started. Confidential human source met with Fox at his business. And so they're using this government informant to go around and meet with all of these people. And this informant is recording all of the conversations. Apparently, Fox described it as a snatch and grab, man. We just snatch her. We just grab the governor. Because at that point, we do that, dude, it's over, he said. You know, if we just grab her, we just snatch and grab, it's over. As soon as we have our hands on her, it's it, is what he said. And so there's encrypted group chat messages. You know, how's everybody feel about kidnapping the governor, somebody says. And CHS2 is now in that call. And so we see these confidential informants just sort of interspersing themselves in the middle of all this. And this is the indictment. This is the complaint. You can just see it goes on. A lot of the same language. They've got daytime surveillance from August 29th, 2020. All from Special FBI Agent Richard Trask. And Richard Trask continues. He just writes it for another 14 pages, 15 pages. He signs off on it because they wanted to get all of this done before November 3rd, the date of the national election. All of this was being done to influence it. FBI reviewed the group chat, and they say that they all were going to be exchanging tactical gear. They were going to be making payments on explosives. They're going to be taking time off work. They've got purchasing of tasers, 800,000 volt tasers. Fear is going to be manifested through bullets, they say. And so the FBI agent and the confidential human enforcers are just gathering all of this up and lopping it together. Now, the defense has largely made the point that this is all just body talk. It's locker room talk. You know, it's all just a bunch of people just goofing around. They're LARPing. It's live action role playing happening here. They're not serious. They're not going to go out there and actually do any of this stuff, obviously, but they're talking about it. And they're out there, they're doing their field training exercises, and they're having fun. But it's all just play talk, is what the defense has largely said. Up until this point. Now, there's a lot bigger problem here. It's sounding like the FBI agents were a little bit more involved than just sort of receiving data. Just observing this conspiracy evolving organically on its own. Turns out that's not really how that happened. Maybe the FBI was a lot more involved in all of this stuff. And so let's take a quick look at the other components of the mind map. We learned a little bit about the judge. We know trial is coming up. We know who the defendants are. We know who some of the co-conspirators are. Let's take a look now at the government. Let's see how this all flushes out. Now, we're going to dive into this a little bit further, and I actually have slides for this. But I want to show you how this works. So we've got these 3 FBI agents we're going to be spending some time on in this next segment. Henrik Impola. He's up at the top. We're going to talk about him. We're going to talk about Jayson Chambers, also an FBI agent. We're also going to talk about Richard Trask. Richard Trask has been in the news. We've already talked about him on this channel previously. But Jayson Chambers is very interesting because there's these other companies that exist. Companies called Intel, companies called Infraguard that filed taxes. And so we're going to break all of that down. But let's keep our bearings straight. Let's understand where this is. This is part of the government, their investigation, part of an FBI operation to go and bust these people. So let's dive in. These are the 3 FBI agents: Richard Trask, Jayson Chambers, and Henrik Impola. Now, I want to share this article with you. This was written by Julie Kelly over from American Greatness. And she's asking about this, and she's been doing some serious work on this case as well as the J6 cases. And the title of her article that was written yesterday says, "Was the FBI Whitmer chicanery a warm-up for January 6th? In other words, was the FBI getting a trial routine, a trial run in here with this case?" Which is a pretty provocative statement. Was the FBI encouraging this conspiracy or this criminality taking place in Michigan, as a warm-up session for what's going to come next in January? Very interesting question. So she says there's a lot of questions mounting around what happened on J6. A lot of very interesting similarities with what happened to Governor Whitmer. And as I mentioned, we had some deadlines coming up from the court docket, and we saw a lot of activity. Kelly writes, defense attorneys in the Whitmer case are carefully compiling evidence that depicts an elaborate tale of FBI entrapment. At least a dozen FBI informants were involved in the failed plot. What does that equal? 1 FBI asset per defendant. 1-to-1. You 1 FBI agent per 1 defendant. Isn't that nice? Everybody gets their own special agent. Well, that's really nice of the government for them to do that. They're as big as the conspiracy. They have as many people in it as they're alleging are in it. Great. FBI agents handling the informants, according to Kelly, directed every move. They funded the training. They funded reconnaissance trips. They even organized a national militia conference in Ohio in June to lure potential accomplices. Do you see this here? The FBI organized a national militia conference in Ohio. Like a honeypot, just to capture, I guess, all the people, who are opposed to lockdown and tyrannical governments. I don't know. Several men were arrested in October 2020 when the lead informant, the person, who was informing the government, drove them to meet an undercover FBI agent to purchase munitions. This was the conclusion of a 6-month-long scheme. News of the shocking plot made national headlines. Early voting was underway in Michigan. Pretty damn important state, isn't it? Joe Biden, Whitmer, and the media, they blamed Donald Trump for inciting an attempted domestic terrorist attack. Isn't that sounds familiar. It does sound familiar, Julie. Wow, weird. Yeah, happened again, a couple months after that. So she goes through and does some serious heavy lifting. She's done an amazing job on this article. Here's what it says. As she's already written about back in October, this little plot that involved Whitmer, who happened to have a very public feud with Trump during 2020, it started from an FBI operation called Operation Cold Snap. This is a multi-state undercover FBI spy ring intended to surveil, quote, militia groups. And it's really those militia groups that are opposed to state lockdown policies. We didn't see a whole lot of Operation Cold Snap going after Antifa, did we? Did we see them set up an Antifa conference in June? Did we see them set up an anti-Derek Chauvin rally to capture all the BLM supporters or all the Antifa people? No, you didn't. But they certainly did when it was serving their interests. Here, this was going after the militia groups that were upset with the lockdown policies. And so one of these FBI agents that we can see over here on the left, a guy by the name of Henrik Impola. He acknowledges a lot of this. He, in fact, was one of the FBI special agents who was managing the Whitmer kidnapping plan. And in testimony earlier this year, he confirmed the existence of this operation, Operation Cold Snap. He said, quote, "From the FBI through the Domestic Terrorism Operations Center, I was aware of other FBI investigations in Baltimore and Milwaukee and Cincinnati and Indiana involving other militia members." When we were talking about Whitmer, he was actually a case agent for this operation, 11-year Bureau veteran, spent his entire career counterterrorism, militia extremism. And so that gave him the authority to designate the Wolverine Watchmen, which is out in Michigan. It's a Facebook group, no real organization. It was coincidentally formed just months before the terror enterprise to justify the government's central involvement in the rigging kidnapping scheme. So maybe even hinting that, the government may have been involved in creating some of this stuff. So we get Henrik Impola, FBI agent, who is acknowledging that, FBI was all over the country going after these militia groups who are upset with lockdowns. He's reporting out of a satellite office in Flint, acknowledges they're deeply involved. Now, he was the manager of this organization or of this operation. He works out of a satellite office that reports to Michigan's only FBI field office in Detroit. So obviously his testimony would be pretty important, wouldn't it? Pretty important to persuading a jury that they actually intended to do what they're claiming they intended to do. But guess what? He's not going to testify. Trials are scheduled to begin in March. Judge is not going to let him. Why? Because the government is not going to call him. That's because defense attorneys in another case accuse him of lying. So Impola is testifying in another criminal case. Defense attorneys working that case say this guy's a liar and we can prove it because he lied on this issue. And so now, since he's a liar, and it sounds like there may be some hard proof of that, the government decides not so honest, a little bit dishonest, lacking in credibility. And guess what you get to talk about when you put somebody on the stand? Their character for truthfulness. So if this agent, Impola, who has been identified as a liar in a parallel case, takes the stand, then the defense attorneys can say, you're kind of a liar, aren't you? Because in that other case, here's what happened. And so the government doesn't want that to happen, do they? So guess what? Well, they just are not going to call him. The guy who was intimately involved in this case, well, I'm not going to call him. Bad witness. Okay, maybe that happens. You throw out a bad officer here or there. Okay, that guy screwed up. Get him out. But it doesn't taint the entire case. Right? You got other FBI agents that you can use. We've got Agent Trask. We've got Agent Chambers. What about them? They're going to come in and testify, right? No, wrong. They're not testifying either because the Justice Department notified the court on Friday that all three of the top agents will not testify. Why? Why? Because they've got allegations of misconduct. They've got allegations of domestic abuse, and they've got political bias. Okay. The government filed this motion that we're going to read that they are not going to be testifying. In fact, let's take a quick pause and just look at that language right now. I don't think I clipped it. So let's take a look at where this comes from. If you're on the mind map, let me show you where this is. FBI agents testifying as witnesses. The government, we'll go through this in a little bit further detail, but the government, this is a 10-page motion, and you can see here at the bottom paragraph, it says the government does not intend to call Chambers, Impola, or Trask as witnesses. So they're not going to be called. This is from the government's own document. You can see they submitted this, signed off on down here by Niels R. Kessler, who, of course, is the U.S. prosecuting attorney. And so we can now dive into it a little bit further. Who are these people? We already know who Henrik Impola is. So we talked about him. Case manager, he's not going to be testifying. Well, that's weird. I wonder who else is here. How about Richard Trask? He's that agent we heard a lot about. Also a pretty important witness. Why? because he signed off on the criminal complaint. Let's look at this here. Page 1 of 1. This was filed back in October of 2020, right before the election was heating up. Just under a month away, in fact. This gets filed, and we can see here from June 20 to present in the county of Kent and elsewhere, conspiracy to commit kidnapping. And then we go through, we already went through on the show today, the rest of the criminal complaint. We already looked through that. And so we've got Richard Trask, who signed off on this. Richard Trask, the special agent. And if you go back over to the mind map, he wrote the whole indictment. This guy wrote the entire document, okay? Richard Trask, if you recall, if you read the complaint, his name is right here. Richard Trask 2. He wrote this whole document. It's 15 pages. I'm a special agent. I investigated blah, 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 blah. Confidential, everybody. Okay, so he drafted that. Now, let's learn a little bit more about this guy, who, as we know, according to the government, is also not going to be testifying. Can you believe this? He wrote the complaint. This guy drafted the document that was the first thing filed in court to start the whole thing. Not going to testify. Why? Well, he's got some pretty bad problems in his case. After he signed the criminal complaint against the 6 defendants and filed that with court, well, he went out to a swingers party at a local hotel. And, if that's what you're into, nothing wrong with that. That's fine. Go wild. But it's problematic when you start drunkenly assaulting your wife also. Not a good idea. Police body cam footage released this week show the inside of Trask's Kalamazoo home. There's a bed sheet in there stained with blood. Trask's wife told the officers that her husband hit her head against the nightstand multiple times in the early hours of July 18th, causing a laceration and strangulation marks on her neck. Trask, quote, choked her out, she said, which is a gigantic problem. I mean, in Arizona, that's an aggravated assault. That's a felony. And that is, somebody can die if you choke them in their neck. It's different than punching somebody in the chest, choking them on the neck. So he was arrested about 4:15 a.m., 1 count of assault. He was drunk, wearing no shirt. He had blood on the side of his face. Let's see. Nobody asked him to take a breathalyzer test. Nobody charged him with driving under the influence either. That's very convenient. On Monday, he pled no contest. He was sentenced to time served. He spent 2 nights in jail after his arrest, and he paid court costs. So he was told, you go close this thing out immediately. He goes and pleads no contest, doesn't fight it at all. Save your career. Go plead guilty. Don't fight this thing. Accept responsibility. Okay. Probably be put on probation for some period of time, and, everybody will forget about it. So this guy is the guy who signed off on the criminal complaint. He's credited with helping to thwart the entire plot. Age 39, out of Kalamazoo, charged with assault with intent to do great bodily harm, less than murder, following a domestic incident with his wife. $10,000 bond, could face up to 10 years in prison, but he didn't. He had 2 days in jail, time served. It's very nice to be an FBI agent. Very, very convenient, especially if you're charged with crimes. A couple days, not even a big deal. Very nice. Now, as I mentioned, he's this guy, right? He signed off on the document, Richard J. Trask. So he's got all this background, and now, because of his criminality, because he smashed his wife's head multiple times into the side of a dresser and then choked her out on top of it, pleads no contest to get 2 days in jail. His testimony is highly problematic now. So the government just, sorry, just not going to call that guy. We don't intend to call him at all. Very nice. So we see that our FBI agents are just slowly dropping off the board. Henrik Impola is not going to be testifying. Richard Trask is not going to be testifying. And then we have Jayson Chambers. Well, certainly we are not going to lose all 3 FBI agents, right? This one's interesting. Jayson Chambers. Who is this special FBI agent? Some people might have an indication that he has a alter ego. a pseudonym that is floating around out there. He even might be a right-wing troll. And he might have even tweeted about the FBI investigation plot before it even went public. Why? Because he's got inside knowledge. He knows. Great reporting over here from Ken Benzinger and Jessica Gerritsen over at BuzzFeed. Like, really, really good reporting. They have done some serious digging into this guy. It's really impressive. Follow along. Let's listen. It says, adding to the confusion, one of the lead FBI agents in the case is listed as the owner of an internet intelligence company. And the troll claims to be the CEO of that company. And one of the FBI agents is connected. Let's see what's happening here. We know that all this took place October 2020. Very curiously, on October 7th of 2020, very interesting Twitter account called Ravaging, with two I's in the ing, known for right-wing trolling, issued an enigmatic warning. Don't worry, Michigan. I told you a lot more is coming soon. And you can see that here. This was actually posted October 7th. Michigan, Supreme Court rules Governor Whitmer did not have the authority to issue COVID orders April 30th. She abused her power. Like I said, the Democrats think they are above the law. Don't worry, Michigan. I told you a lot more coming soon. Oh, and so you're probably reading that. If you're on Twitter, you're like, oh, this is just a right-winger MAGA lunatic. No, he's just an anti-COVID anti-vaxxer. This is just somebody who's just ranting and raving. They're not connected to any part of reality at all. Well, guess what? Turns out that might have been an FBI agent. Might have been Jayson Chambers, because they did some digging on this. And so while he's out there tweeting, I told you, Michigan, all this is coming. I saw that this was coming. People were investigating this Twitter account. After they posted that tweet on October 7th, the FBI executed coordinated raids throughout Michigan. They arrested nearly a dozen people, allegedly in the plot to kidnap the governor. And then the next day after that happened, this Twitter account once again posts, I told you ahead of time. This was coming. Ravaging says, I told you ahead of time, Michigan. I also warned of the training camps. It's all on my timeline, and prior to this going down, I told you, I warned you. Most importantly, I warned the left-wing radical politicians to be very careful of when they lost control of the monster that they created. Oh, wow. So it sounds like this person, who's definitely not an FBI agent, was warning, raids got executed, and then he went and said, I told you so. And he also said later in September, always still and silent until I'm not. Soon, Michigan, soon. Okay, that was on 9/24. So that was even before the actual arrests took place and the raids took place in October. So before that, in September, he said it's coming soon. Then he said, I told you there is a lot more coming soon. And then he says, I warned you, October 8th. Now, what's so curious about all of this, of course, is that the Twitter account, Ravaging, if you read the bio, says that he's the CEO of a cyber intelligence firm called X-Intel. Oh, that's curious. X-Intel. So follow along now. We still don't know who this FBI agent is. We don't know that there is an FBI agent really behind this Twitter account. But we know that this guy's kind of had an inkling about what was happening in Michigan. In fact, he knew so much about it that he issued a warning. There was a raid and an arrest. And then he said, I told you so. So somebody picked up on that and they said, who is this guy? How does he know all this information? And so they looked at his Twitter bio. And it says that he is the CEO of X-Intel. Okay, so everybody says, well, we better go figure out that. Who is X-Intel? And when you go over to the office of the Secretary of State out of New Mexico, and you go and you look up X-Intel right here, the name of the limited liability company called X-Intel LLC is registered right in New Mexico. Zip code 87532. Espanola is the name of the city, right on Coronado Avenue. Business filings, and guess who this is registered to? You see it right down here in the bottom. Effective April 4th, 2019, ex-Intel is owned by Jayson Chambers. Whoa! That's very convenient. So it sounds like you have an FBI agent who made a fake Twitter account called Ravaging, is leaking information, trolling, and then it's actually the owner of a company who happens to be an FBI agent. Okay. It's even worse than that. So, Jayson Chambers now is an FBI agent who is a part of ex-Intel, who has apparently a fake Twitter account. Now, that fake Twitter account, you could say that Twitter account was not Jayson Chambers. Maybe they just knew Jayson Chambers was the owner of ex-Intel, and they did that. But then how would that Twitter account know about the plot and the raid before it all took place, and then simultaneously know about it right after the fact? Seems very convenient, doesn't it? But certainly he would say, oh, I don't know why they're saying they're the CEO of ex-Intel. Don't know why they would say that. I have no idea. Would be very nice to see his cell phones, wouldn't it? So that we could dive in and see if he was posting on those Twitter accounts. Would be very convenient. Now, we saw that this organization called ex-Intel, owned by Jayson Chambers, according to New Mexico, they have a trademark. Ex-Intel. It's a nice name. Or EXE Intel, or whatever they're calling it. So they have a trademark. That trademark is owned by a man named Jamie Chenaga. He's a cybersecurity expert who also volunteers for a company called InfraGard. InfraGard is a government-funded nonprofit that collaborates directly with the FBI on counterterrorism, counterintelligence, cybercrime, and other matters. This is what their website looks like. InfraGard is a partnership between the FBI and members of the private sector for the protection of U.S. critical infrastructure. Seamless collaboration. They want to provide details to the FBI. Membership includes business executive, entrepreneurs, lawyers, security officials, all blah, blah, blah. Advancing national security. Join today. So you sign up for this membership subscription program, whatever. Now, they went and actually, like I said, amazing reporting. They went and dug up their tax records. 2017, they filed. What does InfraGard do? Well, they say, here's our mission and our most significant activities. They say, our goal is to provide members a forum for education and training on counterterrorism and counterintelligence, cybercrime, and other matters relevant to the informed reporting of potential crimes and attacks on the nation. And it goes on. So now what we can see is the connection. If you go back over to the mind map, you can see that is all fleshed out in there, and you can see the various connections. So let's pull that back up. Come on, computer. All right, so here's the mind map, and we can see that we had those several different agents that were detailed here. We've got Jayson Chambers. Whoa, everything's getting moved around. I'm not sure why. So I must have moved something around. But Jayson Chambers and InfraGard, ex-Intel, these are the organizations. There was somebody else. What happened? Are people moving stuff around on here? Yeah, so something got moved. This is connected up here. Jayson Chenaga is up here. He's the guy who actually owns InfraGard, where the taxes came from. And so that's really what it should look like. But you can see here very interesting connections. And so it sounds like Jayson Chambers actually was somebody who was posting stuff on Twitter. I mean, he was highly involved in the case. And they asked him about this. He's not going to be testifying. Hey, Jayson, any comments on any of this? You want to give us a statement? He declined to comment, of course. Spokesman for the FBI also declined to comment. The identity of the individual and the individuals behind the account, of course, they could not be ascertained, but as soon as this started being investigated, ex-Intel website went offline. As soon as they sent over messages, BuzzFeed took them offline. It's also not cached online because it's been excluded from the Internet Archive. So these are people who are trying to cover their tracks, and they're taking everything down. Ex-Intel was suspended as well. They tried to contact Chanaga. He said, yeah, I filed the paperwork, but I don't know anyone associated with Ex-Intel. He doesn't know anybody who's behind that account. And he says that he's been the victim of doxing attempts for a long time. They're trying to fraudulently link him to the company, he says. So he doesn't have any explanation as to why his own company, which owns the Ex-Intel trademark, is registered at the same rural New Mexico address as the Ex-Intel LLC is registered. He said he was going to respond in writing, but he never did. So this guy's full of crap as well. No, I have no idea. Ex-Intel? What are you talking about? No idea. Never even heard of it. I've been the victim of doxing. They're trying to connect me with that company. Yeah. And they say, well, that's interesting. So why does the LLC registration documents match your address where your company is registered and you happen to own the trademark for that organization as well? So he's full of it also. All law enforcement officials, all FBI agents. Now, that all of this has been uncovered, there's a lot more to dig into. Let's go back to the mind map because I had some things I wanted to talk about over there, but looks like it's a little bit out of order for some reason. Let's see if I can figure out what's happening here. Yep, that's what's happening. I made it so that everybody else can edit it, which was not a good thing. And when I did that, everybody started changing stuff around. So guess what we're going to have to do now? We're going to have to revert back to a different version, which fortunately I can do. And we have done so, I think. Hopefully. Let's try this again. All right, so I'm trying to revert these old versions. All right, so I'm gonna just try to pull it up this way. Okay, so we have several different motions that we're going to be talking about today. The first one is this one. Now, I wanted to explain exactly what's happening. The U.S. government now is submitting several different motions to the court trying to stop certain things from happening. These are called motions in limine. And the first one that I want to talk about is this one. So here is, we just got done talking about the FBI agents. We know that the FBI agents are not going to be called, that the government is not going to bring them out. And so I saw a super chat come in from Jay. Can the defense call those shady agents? Thanks for the mind map. And the answer is yes, they can. But the government is really trying to limit what they can ask them about because the government is so stinking shady. Not only are those bad witnesses who they're not going to call because it's going to wreck their cases, but now if the defense calls them, they're going to try to limit what they can ask them. So this is what this is. This is the government's motion in limine to exclude evidence and to preclude improper impeachment. Okay? Exclude certain evidence and then stop the defense from impeaching these FBI agents with their own problems. Here's what it says. It's 10 pages. We can get through it quickly. The government says, Judge, the defendants here intend to offer unsubstantiated claims that an FBI agent orchestrated an entrapment scheme. And he did it for money. And they're also saying that another FBI agent was accused of perjury. We talked about him. And they're also saying that evidence that a former agent was terminated after being charged with domestic assault is all unrelated. Those 3 FBI agents, we don't want to talk about any of that stuff. They're saying the defense wants to offer Facebook messages that the former agent allegedly posted that were critical of the last president. So that one of those FBI agents was also ripping on Donald Trump. Now, the prosecutor says, Judge, these issues, these topics of conversation are totally improper. They're irrelevant. They don't matter to any of this stuff. And so we're asking that you throw this out. Don't let the defense ask the FBI agents about any of this stuff because it's too damaging for us, is what they're saying. They give us some facts. Defendants charged with trying to conspire to kidnap the governor. In late August 2021, the defendants submitted motions that somebody was posting very interesting tweets, these enigmatic tweets. And they concocted this theory that Special Agent Chambers was involved in this creation of this company. Defendants are suggesting that Chambers might have violated FBI policy by seeking a new job. Now, Chambers, they say, has never denied filing the incorporation papers for Intel, which was going to be just a security consulting firm that he was going to join after leaving the FBI. Totally innocent. But he never did leave the FBI. He just decided to stay with the FBI. And so he left that project without ever even doing anything with it. So this is all just, this is all just a bunch of nonsense. They're just trying to make this up to drum up business, they say. At a hearing in September, the court in that case made no finding of misconduct against Impola, the other lying FBI agents. And so they're saying that he should not be allowed to be asked about that. There was an accusation back during that time. In an email dated previously, Croft claimed that they'd come into conversations that support that Chambers was trying to monetize Intel. There was an email that went back and forth. And so here's what the crux of this argument is. It's that this is going to confuse the jury. That it's too much. It's misleading. Yeah, okay, so what? Agent Trask, smashed his wife's head into the side of a table 7 times. Nobody cares. That's irrelevant to this case because these guys were going to kidnap the governor. So they're saying you shouldn't be conflating the two. They say the risk of misleading the jury is really acute when people can come up with their own inferences. Like, if Agent Trask, beats and chokes out his wife, that maybe he's not an honorable man with integrity who's going to tell the truth in a criminal complaint. Maybe that. Don't know. But you can see here, this goes on and on. This is a lot of the law. They're trying to address Richard Trask's domestic assault charges. They say that there are unfounded allegations. They have no probative value. And they're also trying to limit them from even using this as impeachment materials. So here's what we see. Niels R. Kessler says, for the foregoing reasons, the government requests the court exclude evidence relating to Intel. Everything we talked about, they don't want you to hear about that. They also want you to not talk about the unfounded allegations against S.A. Impola, Special Agent FBI Impola. So if the defense does call him, they want the court to limit the conversation about Intel, that Twitter account, all of that. They want the court to limit any conversations about the allegations about Impala's lying, and they want to limit any conversations about Trask's domestic assault charges or his social media posts. And they don't want them to be able to impeach them with that either. So they're saying defense, yep, you're free, call them in if you'd like, but it's not something that they want them to get into on a deeper level. All right. And so we've got a couple other motions. I'm trying to find them since my mind map is all discombobulated. Let's see here. We had the text messages. Identifying Brady material was one that I wanted to talk about. So we'll get to that one. Yes, here's another one. Okay. Defendants testifying as hearsay. Here's what we're looking at. The next question is that if the defendants, so if Adam Dean Fox, if Barry Gordon Croft, if all of these people are here, the government doesn't want them to say certain things. So we know that the government doesn't want the FBI agents to come out and testify about certain things. We don't want the defense to ask them about the domestic violence or about the lying or any of those things. But what if the defendants themselves take the stand? What if Adam Fox gets up there? What if Daniel Harris? What if Brandon Caserta? What if they all get up there and they take the stand? Doesn't happen often, but as we talked about in the start of the show, they have strength in numbers. What if they all have the same story and they all get up there and they say it one after the other and they all rebut the government's allegation? And they've got corroboration to back up their claims. They've got other witnesses that are credible that are going to buttress them up. In other words, it's not going to just be a bunch of defendants up there trying to talk themselves out of a prison sentence. But you've got 5 people that are sharing a uniform story that's being supported, corroborated by external witnesses, by other direct evidence or circumstantial evidence. And so the government is saying, we're in deep doo-doo if that happens. And so we want to make sure that if they do in fact take the stand, that we limit their testimony so that they can't talk about those out-of-court conversations. That's what this document is. So the government prosecutor, once again, filed this again on 12/17 because we were up against the deadline. 10 pages. It's a government motion in limine to stop the defendants from saying certain things. Prosecutor says, Judge, it's come to my attention here that the defendants have indicated that they intend to offer their own hearsay statements at trial. They're going to offer an out-of-court statement in court. We can't allow that to happen. Prosecutor says admitting these statements would permit the defendants to effectively testify without being subject to cross-examination because they are not within any recognized hearsay exception or exemptions. They should be excluded. Prosecutor gives us some facts here. Talking about the Wolverine Watchman, October 9th, August 9th, we see lots of conversations until we fast forward to September 17th. At a motion hearing, a defense lawyer, Franks, characterized some of the comments as actually favorable to the defense and said that he wanted to offer those statements as evidence. In particular, conversations about the defendant's fears about being infiltrated by informants or exposed by careless listeners. For example, in August of 2020, somebody named Paul Bellar, a Wolverine Watchman, he left Boogaloo documents related in his vacated apartment, prompting police inquiries. Several other people, Harris, Franks, Castera, Garben, and others, met at his residence to tighten their operational security. The defendants brought personal identification documents to establish they're not law enforcement or informants, and then they switched to a new encrypted chat application that Harris advised could be deleted in the case of FBI contact. And Frank said that that's actually favorable and that he wants to talk about that and introduce all of that at trial. And the judges and the prosecutor is saying, no, he should not be allowed to do that. We see a lot of law comes out of here. We can skip over the law, state of mind, the rule of completeness. The doctrine of completeness does not make inadmissible evidence admissible. So they're just really, really trying to narrow their testimony. They conclude, they say the statements the defendants intend to introduce will not be necessary to correct any mistaken impression left by the other parts of the same recordings. On the contrary, the government expects to prove some of the defendants were initially skeptical of Croft's and Fox's plans, but their confidence and commitment increase with training, reconnaissance, and preparation. Therefore, we ask that they exclude any self-exculpating hearsay statements offered by the defendants. So they're really trying to just narrow their ability to testify, and it's pretty amusing. Okay, and so we have one final document before we wrap it up for the day that I wanted to cover with you. This is a defense motion. So this is a defense motion that is now being sent to the court. So let me frame this out. A lot of different co-defendants in this case. A lot of different government informants. We've already talked about 3 FBI agents that were part of the investigative team that are not going to be testifying, at least for the government. The defense may call them, probably should, but they're not going to be called by the government. 3 FBI agents. This was a month-long inquiry. We know that they set up different organizations, and they were really sort of encouraging people to participate so that they could investigate them. So then as the trial now comes to a head, as the defense, which has been amazing thus far, they are acting in unison, and they are filing motions left and right that are very good, very substantive motions, asking very good questions. The government is kind of on its heels a little bit, right? They're down 3 FBI agents. They just lost 3 of them. So what did they do? They took all of their what's called discovery. Files, hard drives, videos, conversations, text, recording, computer-aided dispatch records, everything. Okay, and law enforcement agencies, they have a lot of it. They gobble up data like it's nobody's business. GPS records, all sorts of stuff. So the defense is saying, excuse us, we think that your lying FBI officers and agents are liars, and we want the exculpatory material that you have in your possession. We want to know what you have. We think that their phones are problematic, their computers are problematic, their emails are problematic. Everything that happened in this case, in this investigation, is tainted. And you have access to the data. You're the government. You hold all the cards. So the defense says, we want it all. We want the exculpatory information. Give it to us. The government said, no problem. Here you go. And guess what? It was like a semi-truck, tractor, trailer hauling in barrels of court documents. And the defense can't go through it all. So here's how they're responding. They say, Judge, it's a big problem here. We're asking that you compel the government to identify the materials that we need. They gave us this discovery dump, and they're doing this to be overly burdensome. They start off with a quote, he who must search a haystack for a needle is likely to end up with the attitude that the needle is not worth the search. Brown versus Allen, U.S. Supreme Court case. What does that mean? If you know that there might be a needle in there and you dump a bunch of hay onto somebody, they're probably just going to decide it's not worth digging into to go find the needle. And that's a pretty obvious common thing. So they say now the defendants are coming, and we're asking the court for an order to direct the government to identify the material we need. They have to identify the evidence contained therein that they want to use at trial, and they need to identify the documents that are duplicates of already produced discovery. They're describing what the government handed over to them. They say the discovery in this case is voluminous. This case has been pending for 14 months. On the eve of trial, which is starting next year, the government has dumped nearly as much discovery on the defendants as it did in the preceding year. On the eve of trial, they just came over with a wheelbarrow full of documents and dumped them all over our front porch. We're not happy about it. Concerned about the ability to proceed to trial on schedule in July of this year, the defendants, us, moved for an early designation of witnesses and exhibits. We wanted to know what they are presenting. The court denied the motion on the record. You don't get to know it's too early. At the time of the July motion, I want to point out that the government had produced over 140,000 pages of documents. There were 23,000 electronic files that they dumped over there. Then in September, the government requested the coordinating discovery attorney, the CDA, send a drive for duplication of another discovery dump. So the defense sent that drive over there. The government sat on the drive until November 30th. The defense sent it over on September 13th. Overnight. Defense attorneys get an email. Hey, we've got some documents for you. No problem. We get it in the mail. It's overnighted on September 13th. Then those lazy prosecutors over there at the US DOJ, they just sat on the drive until November 30th, and then they returned it finally. When we looked at it, the drive contained a discovery production that was dated on September 15th, which is great because they didn't get the drive back until November. There was another production on November 17th, along with a number of, quote, media files. The combined production sent over to the CDA on November 30th, it contains, for you tech people out there, 385 gigabytes of data spanning 124,782 data files. 385 gigabytes, folks. There were 4,105 new PDF documents. So now there are a total of 27,000 PDF files in the new dump. 27,000 files. 914 hours of audio and video produced on the dump. There were 5,556 jail calls that are produced in a non-native format. So that means they have to convert them all, listen to them all, transcribe them all. And so the defense says, Judge, we know what they're doing here. Let me explain. Trial is 79 days away. To review just the audio and the video in the discovery produced, just the audio and the video, it would take an average of 11.5 hours per day, every day, between now and trial. And that doesn't even account for reviewing the 27,000 pages of documents and other items produced, like the Jenks materials that are coming. So we don't have 11.5 hours per day to just sit there and listen to documents. And we also don't have time to read 27,000 documents before March. So, Judge, we need some help here. In order to triage the review and to keep the trial date on track, we don't want you to change the trial. We're not asking you to change the trial date. Leave it at March. But here's what we do need. We want the government to go back through all of this garbage that they literally just threw on our doorstep. And we need them to identify a few things for us. One, any piece of evidence what they actually intend to introduce at trial. Okay, anything that's irrelevant or superfluous, get rid of it. If they intend to introduce it, they should notify us, and then we can go and identify it. They also want to identify any government material that they've identified as Brady or Giglio material. That's exculpatory materials. And they want any material which is substantively, even if not cryptographically, a duplicate of a prior item disclosed, identified. The government, after the defense asked them for this, said, we're not going to give you any of that. You asked for the discovery. It's yours. You comb through it. Figure it out on your own. Now, a year ago, says the defense, during a 2020 December 10th strategy session with Wisconsin-based CHS Steve, Special Agent Impola highlighted the government's plan about the Brady materials. He explained that, quote, the best chance is to create utter confusing, oh my God, this is amazing. Special Agent, FBI Agent Impola, he actually said something like, quote, the best chance is to create utter confusion and chaos by having over-inclusive disclosures. Oh my gosh, they got that on record. CHS said that he was questioned. Another agent explained that that while they may have to turn over all the evidence, they said, quote, we don't have to tell anybody which part is important or not. Right? These are government prosecutors, folks. These are people who are supposed to be doing justice. Okay, this is not supposed to be a vindictive, ex-wife's lawyer or something like that. Oh, we don't have to tell anybody what's important or not. Right? It's, we're talking about litigation where we're supposed to be finding justice, not supposed to be spiteful. These are FBI agents. These are government prosecutors. And they're telling a defendant who still to this day maintains the presumption of innocence, as far as I can tell. They are strategizing about how to make it more difficult for them to defend themselves. It's disgusting behavior. Special Agent Impola said the best chance is to create utter confusion and chaos. We're going to over-disclose everything. We're going to put them in, thousands of Excel files, and we're just going to let them sort through it. We don't have to tell anybody which part is important or not. Impola seems to believe he doesn't have to play fair because he believes that the defense counsel, in this case, are, quote, paid liars whose job it is to, quote, take the truth and portray it in a different sense. In a previous motion, counsel noted it had no evidence that the agents' expressed intention to play discovery games had infected the production. This is no longer the case. The timing and the size of the most recent dump calls into serious question whether Mr. Impola's promise to play discovery games and hide Brady material has actually come to fruition. That guy's a piece of garbage. No question about that. Absolutely horrific. And so they go through some of the law again, talking about Brady material and supporting that. Joshua Blanchard representing, actually this is signed off on by all the attorneys. Julia Kelly for Daniel Harris, Brandon Caserta, Kaleb Franks, Adam Fox. They know exactly what they're doing. They're trying to overwhelm them with over-inclusive discovery. It's offensive. Adam Fox, they're saying, and all the other defendants respectfully request that this court enter an order requiring the government to identify the known Brady material, identify any documents the government intends to produce, and identify any other documents that are duplicates. And that's that. And so we'll continue to follow that along. I'm going to fix the mind map after we get off the show. I don't know what happened there, but that will be corrected after the program. But let's see what you have to say about this over from our friends at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Let's see what we've got here. Pull this up. Where did this go? All right, we got some questions coming in. Got a message from Vientikis. Shout out to Vientikis. John Delar is here. Says, who holds the FBI accountable for their actions? Seems to me that they cause more trouble than they are worth, and the Bureau needs to be disbanded. That's from John Delar. Well, you know, I guess the FBI does. They investigate themselves, and DOJ does. Office of Inspector General sometimes does. They set special counsel, special prosecutors. But it's the FBI. So what's anybody going to do about it? Nothing. We also have T. Blakemore says, do you know that episode of Friends where Joey is in London and has to go into the map to find his way around? Every time you pull up the mind map, I think of that episode and say, I'm going to have to go into the map. That's from T. Blakemore. I actually don't think I've seen that one for some reason. I didn't watch a lot of Friends. I watched a lot more Seinfeld. I know. Which is the better show. Kincaid says, I would like to see more regulation on how informants involve themselves. Also, testifying officials and their agency should be legally liable and restricted when they have, quote, magic evidence and their only word for their narrative. Some are pushing for civil oversight for officers. Why not go one step further? Thoughts? So, so I think what you're talking about, Kincaid, is a distinction between civil oversight for maintenance of an entity or organization versus penalties if they sort of extend beyond the scope of what's allowed. So if they do something outside of their job duties, they're no longer acting as agents of the organization. And when you act as no longer an agent, you're acting on your own. And the question becomes, does that make you liable? Or are you still immune because you're an officer? Do you still have this qualified immunity, or are you losing that because you're stepping outside of what was lawful activity? Chairman of the board just shared a very good image here. Let's pull this one up on the screen. This is chairman of the board over on Locals. FBI pointing at FBI. Which is exactly what this looks like. One FBI agent for every single conspirator? Give me a break. All right, let's see what else. We've got Thunder7 says, I remember how the fake news jumped on this at the time. They wanted to paint Trump and MAGA crowd as violent white supremacist terrorists. But I doubt if they're following up with actually telling the truth. Almost all appears to be certain events that are perpetrated by the FBI. They really have to go. They're totally corrupt. They're partisan. They're against the right. They're now the enemy of the people, and they're a part of the corrupt media. And people are seeing that now. Yeah, and some of this stuff is like pretty obvious. It's in the documents. Sergeant Bob says, looks to me that the FBI continues to be a blot on the reputation of law enforcement. Merrick Garland seems to be using them as the, quote, secret police of the government. Let us hope that the good people of the USA can take back freedom via the ballot box before it is too late. Well, we're coming up on that. We're almost in 2022, Sergeant Bob. I'm with you. I'm hopeful that we see a serious change in direction in this country. We've got Nadarb says, I wonder if that random New Mexico rural address is anywhere close to Zorro Ranch. With the Epsteins and the Maxwells? I don't know. And the, who's the other guy? The former governor. Richardson? Bill Richardson? I think is his name. Yeah, it's a good question. New Mexico has been popping up a lot in the on the show lately. We have a few more. Kincaid says, how did these agents get past the vetting process with all the details you gave about these individuals? Working at a Hobby Lobby would be a hard no. I bet the ringleaders loved using extremists and deviants because they're so eager and easy to manage until they get out of control or caught. If they don't have enough, they'll just make them. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. You know, I don't know how... to me, it feels like it's just a cultural issue there. You know, it's just a cultural thing that there's more people who want to see political objectives achieved, at the expense of what I think are very important civil liberties and, principles of due process and the presumption of innocence. It's problematic. Leafy Bug says, prosecutors toss dirty FBI agents. Rob, are we back to covering the Ghislaine Maxwell trial? Because this sounds like the kind of thing that would happen at a theme party thrown on Epstein Island. Sorry, everyone, but I've warned you before, I'm very immature. Prosecutors toss dirty FBI agents. Oh, I see what you're talking about, Leafy Bug. Oh, that's a bad visual. That's a really bad visual. But you get what I'm saying. They're tossing them out of the witness list. That's all. Grouchy old cat lady says, what part of what you've presented is within the defense's case's hula hoop? What is the defense's approach in this case? Why are you allowed to treat a witness? When are you allowed to treat a witness as hostile? This does really sound like a sting from Grouchy old cat lady. So a lot of questions here, a lot of good ones. I think that the biggest, most interesting one here, Grouchy old cat lady, is the defense approach. Okay, what they're going to be doing here is really trying to dial in on all of these FBI witnesses, FBI agents, and make them the case. Take this case away from the Whitmer plot. It's not about Whitmer. It's not about that at all. It's about the FBI. They concocted the whole thing. And in fact, 3 of their key witnesses, 3 people who were involved, they don't even want to call as witnesses. That is what I would latch on to. I would bite that so hard and make the whole case about that. Because it is. I mean, it really is. That's reasonable doubt. That's where you can tie that in. You can say, listen, they're saying a bunch of this stuff happened, but their own agents are not even here to back it up. They can't corroborate it. The guy who wrote the complaint, the government doesn't want to call and testify. He's not even an FBI agent anymore. He got fired for cracking his wife's head open. Kincaid says, there are better ways of handing over data. They should be demanded to provide their evidence in the context that they are using it, like in a parsed database record. Yeah, look, I've been on the receiving end of these discovery dumps, and it's very frustrating. And they also use proprietary data formats, proprietary software. So they're not sending you a bunch of MP4 files, okay, or MP3s or WAV files. They're not sending you Excel spreadsheets. They're sending you some, jail third-party system that doesn't work. You have to download the thing from their, ultra encrypted website with 35 passwords. It doesn't work. And then when you get it installed, it also doesn't work. So they don't, they make it really difficult. And that's not what this is supposed to be about. This is America. The presumption of innocence is supposed to still reign supreme. Chairman of the board says, hey, Rob, great show. Story reminds me of the Spider-Man meme where they're all pointing at each other. He just posted it and I just shared it. My question is unrelated to this topic, but I just wondered what the show schedule will look like over the holidays. It's a good question, Chairman. I don't really know. I mean, I'm going to do a show tomorrow. That's Thursday and Friday. So I think it's all right on schedule. Yeah, I think Thursday and Friday we'll do shows and come back on Monday. I think it's just regular because Christmas is on Saturday. Good question. Monster One says, did you beat Metroid yet? No, I haven't. I made it to the final boss. I can barely touch the guy. Had to take a break, so I didn't toss my Switch out the window. No, that's exactly the stage that I'm at, Monster One. I'm at that exact stage. I'm at the final boss. I haven't opened it again because he's a total jerk, that guy. Really difficult. I don't think that I'm ever going to beat him, honestly. We'll see. Chairman says, P.S. The new Spider-Man movie is fantastic. Winky. All right. Well, I'm going to go. Oh, we'll have to take a look at that one from Chairman. Oh, look who's here. It's Jake from Oxford. Everybody, brace yourself. We have the smartest man in the world is here. Says, Rob, a few quick things. First, the governor was participating in an extremely expensive version of Breakout Room. FBI agents were just being great helpers. They should not be put down. Second, the mind map is racist, so good job using that. Well, thanks, Jake. I appreciate that. That's a ringing endorsement from Jake from Oxford. Very intelligent. Oxford is at the top of the intelligence hierarchy. It's Oxford, then it goes Harvard, then I think it's Yale, then I think it's the rest of us. Then you go to like government prosecutors, and then I think you're into the animal kingdom after that. So I think that's the hierarchy. Jake's at the very top, which is very good. He's appreciative of our racist mind map. And yeah, that's good. I'm glad you're here. Thanks, Jake. Very fun. So we have Vientica says, I need to make a whiteboard that says, days without a federal agent, false flag. Yeah, I mean, you'd kind of have to reset that a lot, right? Seems like there's a lot of them lately. A few more. Monster One says, I'd hate to see Leafy Bug's search history with that dirty mind. Yeah, I did not even think about that. Sergeant Bob says, still cannot believe I've gone so much to the defense side. Sergeant Bob, listen, we welcome you. Come on over. Welcome you with open arms. Come on. It'll be okay. Oh, there. Yes, it's good. Welcome aboard. Love you guys. Kincaid says, Rob, I regret to hear that. Good on you, sir, and your firm. Also, did you check out? Don't know what that is. No, I haven't checked that out. I think it's the first time I've heard of that. We had a couple super chats that came in. Yesterday, Danielle DeFree says, love your channel. I feel like it's going to be like OJ when he was acquitted in criminal court, but lost in civil, where the major victims will probably participate. That was talking about Ghislaine Maxwell yesterday. Yeah, and thank you for that support there, Danielle. Hope you're here. I think you sent that after the show was over, and so I wanted to make sure that we read that. Thank you. We have another one from Jay talking about, can the defense call those shady agents? They can, but as we read in the motion, they're going to be trying to limit what they can ask them. They don't want to call them, and they don't want them to be asked any questions. So they're trying to limit that, but yeah, I think the defense can and probably will call them. And then lastly, we have TKUA says, is the defense allowed to post the data dump to WikiLeaks post the trial? I don't know about that. I think that there's a lot in there that probably is confidential, right? There's confidential informants, there's undercover names and things like that. So all of that stuff, it wouldn't be appropriate for the defense to disclose anything that would be in violation of court orders or privacy laws or anything like that. But if this is all part of the public record, like, so for example, I think this case is going to go to trial. I don't think that they're going to plea out on this thing, nor should they, unless it's like a dismissal. But I don't think that's going to happen. But, what does come out, just like we did with the Ghislaine Maxwell case, what actually does come out as exhibits at trial, we will see all of that. But all of that other data stuff, they oftentimes what will happen is when you're receiving that disclosure, you will acknowledge with the prosecutor. So we do this here in Arizona. You sort of acknowledge that you're only going to be using this for criminal justice purposes. And so, not supposed to disclose all of that stuff. Now, if you went and filed a FOIA request, a Freedom of Information Act request, and you said, I want all of this data, and you got that through your own mechanisms, I think that certainly you could post that. Not sure that there's anything that's any good in there, because it sounds like what these jerk FBI agents were trying to do was to just overwhelm them with over-inclusive discovery. Ridiculous. Vianticus is here, says, Leafy Bug needs to keep his mind out of the gunner. Well, it's spicy. I mentioned it before, a band. Oh, that was from Kincaid. Oh, no, I have not checked them out, but I will do that now that you've mentioned them. Polyphia, the music band. Let me check them out. All right, I've got that saved. Thank you for the ping. Interesting. Based out of Plano, Texas. Primarily instrumental. Progressive rock band. That sounds awesome, because I happen to love instrumental music. The sound of the human voice singing doesn't do it for me. I know that is a little bit strange, but what can I say? So thank you for that, Kincaid. I appreciate it. And let's see. Oh, Vianticus is warning me. Let me see this one. Leafy Bug needs to keep his mind out of the gutter. I don't like the company. That's from Vianticus. You missed the last part of it. I read it. There it is. Leafy Bug heard it. That's from Vianticus. All right, my friends, that is it for us for the day. We're going to wrap it up right here. We're going to be back here tomorrow to do it all again, and I hope you come and join us. Before we wrap up, let's give some welcomes to some new supporters over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Big welcomes to Falcone US NY. We've got Well is here. We've got Reen is here. We've got Not RWC110, Chuck David, Mark on W, Shindog, Nosy, Texas Rosie, Taz Mom, Cookie Monster 2, AJ Darsha, Molly Pop Inc., Guitar Terry, Randy J98 Westworld. We've got Equestrian Girl, Richie DC, Red Jersey, Nikki Dragon, Things and Stuff, Donna 107, The Vez, Jimmy W, Big Dother Bites. We've got Kimmy Cat 03, Kevin AZ, Antar 24, Queen of Tennessee, Rebby Lee, Music Box Lady, and Big Ree are all in the house. And that, my friends, is it for me for the day. We're going to be back here tomorrow to do it all again. I don't know what we're talking about tomorrow. Ghislaine Maxwell not going to be in deliberations, not going to get a verdict on her. I have a sneaking suspicion that something will happen that will be worthwhile, that we'll talk about, and we'll do that. And I hope that you come and join us in that journey. 4 p.m. Arizona, 5 p.m. Central Texas time, 6 p.m. on the East Coast. And for that one Florida man, everybody else, have a tremendous evening. Sleep very well. I'll see you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.